Hello, welcome to Performance Anxiety. We analyse the film, television, theatre and comedy performances that everybody is talking about. I'm Alex Dale, and with me is my resident film expert,
Dr. Maren Tom.
On this episode, Oppenheimer, directed by Christopher Nolan. Written by Christopher Nolan, based on the book American Prometheus by Kai Bird and Martin Sherman. Starring Cillian Murphy as J. Robert Oppenheimer, Emily Blunt as Kitty Oppenheimer, Robert Downey Jr. as Louis Strauss, Alden Ehrenreich as Senate aide. And, in a cast of thousands, are you ready for this?
Go, go, go.
Kenneth Branagh, Tom Conti, David Krumholtz, Matthias Schweighöfer, Josh Hartnett, Florence Pugh, Matthew Modine, Matt Damon, Dane DeHaan, Jack Quaid, James Urbaniak, Devon Bostick, Rami Malek, Oscar winner Rami Malek, Olivia Thirlby, Casey Affleck, James Remar, Gary Oldman, and that's not even half of them.
I know, big budget there, big acting budget.
Yes, someone's got a big Rolodex of acting connections. Why do we want to talk about Oppenheimer? Well, first things first, how are you doing?
I'm okay, yeah. Getting back into the swing of things.
And the swing of things in this case is talking about films. And very specifically, Oppenheimer. Why did we want to talk about Oppenheimer?
Well, Oppenheimer is the second big blockbuster of the summer, isn't it? It had the same release date as the Barbie movie,
famously.
which triggered this kind of fake rivalry between these two very, very different films, which is of course very funny because they're so inherently different.
So it became about which is going to be the summer blockbuster.
Yeah.
Is it going to be this very tacky pink film about a doll, or is it going to be an incredibly serious film about death and destruction?
Yeah, so it became quite a funny way of making a competition out of these two big blockbusters, calling it Barbenheimer or Oppen Barbie.
Because they were going to be released on exactly the same day
Yes.
as well. Well, that's one of the reasons. There are other things that we were interested in as well. So it's very successful. It has lots of very favourable reviews. There's a certain degree of attention on Cillian Murphy as Oppenheimer, as the central performance. But more than all of those things, I think it's important because it's a Christopher Nolan film.
Yes, I think you're right. You know, it's not a film where the star is the main attraction, but we go to watch the film Oppenheimer because it was directed by this very famous director, Christopher Nolan. And he has an established pattern of how to do things, and we know what to expect. Maybe when we go and see Christopher Nolan film.
We're going to get into this later. What does it mean to be a Christopher Nolan film more generally, and more specifically all of the details of that?
Let's see.
Let's see. First question, and the obvious question is, for those people who may not be familiar with this, what is the movie Oppenheimer about?
Well, Oppenheimer is, simply put, the biography or biographical account of the life of Oppenheimer, the man who invented the atom bomb.
That's right. It's the story of Julius Robert Oppenheimer, often called the father of the atomic bomb, in fact, yes.
Well, the film's main plot point is actually a trial that he's on that happened after the testing of the atom bomb. And it is about the trial he is being put on to test his allegiance to the American government. So it's about basically clearing his security pass to work for the American government.
So in some ways quite a minor event, but
Yes.
it's turned into a hugely significant
Yeah,
event.
it becomes the main storyline ultimately.
Now the interesting thing here, I think, is Christopher Nolan is not famous for biopics necessarily. If you look at the list of stuff he's done, his big breakthrough was Memento in 2000. Other very famous movies that he's done are The Prestige, The Dark Knight, Inception, Interstellar, Dunkirk, Tenet. So what kind of films does he make? He doesn't really make biopics.
Well, as I said, we go to the cinema to watch a Christopher Nolan film. And what we know, what he will give us, is an experience of cinema that is a bit unusual. Yes, he is famous for playing around with the elements of the cinematic storytelling. So he plays around with elements of plot, narrative, and story. And often in aid of what he wants to tell us, often what he wants to show us. So often these are things like puzzles and intrigue and red herrings that we as an audience are then made to work at. We are made to work and find out what's the secret, what's the intrigue, what's the story that behind all this.
So he makes puzzle films.
That's what they're called, yes, because you puzzle them together in your head.
Memento being the very famous example of that.
Yes. So his first film was Memento with Guy Pearce, a man who has got amnesia, who cannot remember things for a long time. So he tattoos events onto his body. And we're on a journey with him to find out what happened to him. And so he tells films through flashbacks, flash forwards, things out of sequence. So the idea of plot, story, and narrative become very, very important in Christopher Nolan films.
We're going to have to get into some detail here about those three ideas, I think.
Yes.
In a minute, I think.
Okay.
I just want to do a little bit more scene setting before we get into the nitty-gritty. One of the things that Christopher Nolan has said about his own films is, because he studied English literature, he was kind of jealous of the freedom that writers have about how stories can be told. Specifically, he has the narrative freedoms that authors have enjoyed for centuries, and that filmmakers should enjoy those freedoms as well. So I think that's to your point, is that he chops up stories, tells them in the wrong order,
Yes.
deliberately confuses people.
Deliberately confuses, but also gives people the things that they need to know to puzzle together what's going on.
Right.
And
you
what
can see that.
what he wants them to know what's going on.
And you can see that in Inception is a very famous example of that. Or Tenet, for instance. These are things told out of sequence that are confusing, but suddenly it all falls into place in the last minute.
Exactly. And so Oppenheimer is no different. So he takes a biography and turns it into a puzzle film.
So this is how Oppenheimer, which is ostensibly a biopic, is actually a Christopher Nolan film.
Yes. So he makes it into something very interesting, a puzzle film. So, and what is the puzzle here that you have to solve as a viewer? And it is what he wants this film to be about. And that is a question of how can somebody who invents the atomic bomb live with themselves? What kind of person is this?
So
And that's the question that we are here on a journey to find out. And he, not like a regular linear storyline, yes, where story and plot and narrative are linear and easy to follow, he turns this question into the question he wants to answer through this puzzle, or we have to put together through the cues he gives in the plot, that we can then find out the answer to this question: what kind of person would do something like this?
So, to recap all of that, our question for this episode, more broadly, is what kind of film is Oppenheimer? And we've established it's a puzzle film. And the nature of the puzzle, particularly, is what kind of human being does it take to invent a machine that can destroy the world and then kind of live with themselves after? What kind of person is that?
Exactly. And so Christopher Nolan reveals to us in segments what kind of person this is.
So,
and we, only at the end, we will know what kind of person this is.
and the way he does this is through those three elements you were describing: the plot, the narrative, and the story.
Yes.
So tell me, Professor, I should say, tell me, Dr. Tom, what is the difference between those three elements? Because people use them interchangeably and perhaps a bit too loosely, but they mean specific things.
They actually mean specific things. And if you use them precisely, you can play with these things, these elements of storytelling. So storytellers or filmmakers in this case would differentiate between things like story, or if you want to be pretentious, call it the fabula.
I do want to be pretentious.
And the plot, and if you're pretentious, you call it the sujet, and the narrative. So the story is basically what you would understand. It's the whole story, starting at A and ending at the end. This is it's linear. This is from the beginning of all the information that we have till the end of all the information that we have. Not everything that is story is actually in the film. We don't need it. We can figure out the story ourselves. That's what we do as an audience. What the film gives us, or film as such, it gives us plot. It gives us the important events of the story in a certain sequence, which we then create the story within our heads in, so to speak. And that's the difference between story and plot. So when you go to the cinema, what you actually see is the plot.
So can I be super simple-minded for a moment? The story is an arc or a theme. I'm going to tell you the story of the three little pigs. That's a story.
Yes.
But the plot would be they built the house. You see the house being built. For instance, I'm choosing a very absurd example for my own simple brain.
Yeah, the plot would be the pigs build a house, wolf comes, blows the pig's house down, pigs are unhappy. Let's make it a nice story.
But the story would be build a house out of bricks and you'll defend yourself from a wolf. Right?
That's the moral of the story.
Okay.
Yeah. But so what you actually see is the plot. And the plot are these kind of important events. And Christopher Nolan then takes this idea of plot points and jumbles them up. You know, he shows things out of sequence and only gives you the events he thinks are for you important to know at certain moments in time.
So is this narrative?
The narrative now is how the story is told.
I see.
The narrative has got different elements and different ways of, it's a way of doing things. So these are practical as well as theoretical elements of how the story is then told through the plot points.
I see. So it could be something as structural as the sequence of plot points, but it could also be things like music, acting performances, editing, costume choices, all of those things.
It's the way the story is told.
Okay. So Christopher Nolan mixes these things up.
Yeah. And he does this with a great joy, and also with kind of great talent. So he tells you only the things that you know to know at a certain point to make it exciting.
Right.
So this is why authors and writers and filmmakers jumble up plot points to make something more exciting. You know, if you just told it very boringly linearly, there's nothing for you to do as an audience. Yeah, and this is why it's usually quite boring to watch. It's predictable. You know exactly what's going on. You know, if you know who done it, then there's no mystery there. For example, if you're watching a mystery.
I'm going to be a little bit crass now and say there's a very good quote, but I can't attribute it, which is why I'm being crass. But I think it was maybe John Berger said, the problem with Hollywood stories is not that the stories are boring, but there's nothing but story. Everything is in the purpose of just telling you story all of the time. Right?
Exactly. So there's nothing there for you to do.
Yeah.
You're being just bombarded with this, how you should see and read and understand things. But whereas Christopher Nolan says, no, you have to do a lot of work as the audience. I assume by giving you these kind of cues, the plot points, I give you cues that you can then puzzle together yourself.
Right.
So, and this is often done, for example, in mysteries or so, you know, or things that are told out of sequence. The most famous one is probably Citizen Kane, you know, that starts with Citizen Kane being dead. But it's the story of the life of Citizen Kane. So it's out of sequence and the reporter goes around trying to find out who this person was, Citizen Kane.
Well, it's a similar idea, isn't it? What kind of person is this? Well, to understand that riddle, this puzzle, we have to go back and examine the plot points, the beats of this person's life.
Exactly.
And you can see it in Velvet Goldmine, which of course is a rip-off of Citizen Kane, for example.
But coming back to Christopher Nolan, so he likes things that are mysterious. And so for the example, The Prestige is a very good film about revealing something. And he never reveals anything until the end. Yes, so you can actually talk about Christopher Nolan films without giving away, you know, the most important thing.
The kicker.
The kicker, yeah. But what about Oppenheimer? It's not really a mystery story, is it?
Well, I guess the way we posed it was, what kind of human being is this that can do these things and then live with themselves? Exactly.
So instead of telling you a straightforward biography, this is the kind of person that he is. He turns it into a mystery, a puzzle film, and makes it all dependent on a dialogue that Oppenheimer has with Albert Einstein at the beginning of the film. But we don't know what they're talking about.
It's shown on screen, but you don't hear the dialogue.
Exactly.
It's shown from the perspective of another character in the distance.
Exactly. And you know that this is going to be important. It's going to be the revelation, ultimately, of how to read Oppenheimer, what kind of person he is. And that's, in the end, it's then shown what they are actually talking about. And then you can see, aha. And the whole story makes sense. The way the plot unfolds suddenly makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting, because my experience of watching this was that after the Manhattan trial and the bomb had been detonated, I kind of expected the film to stop at that point, but it actually carried on for another several acts, at least 2 more acts of this trial of Oppenheimer. And then I was suddenly more interested, weirdly, but also more confused. Why are they showing me all of these, what feel like redundant plot points?
Yes, but at the end you knew exactly that they weren't redundant.
Yes.
Because it turns out to be that the whole trial that he is on is the way Christopher Nolan reveals to you what sort of person he is, and thus answering this philosophical question, who would do such a thing as invent an atom bomb? So,
is it worth thinking about Cillian Murphy at this point, do you think?
Well, he is very, very important as a performer of Oppenheimer.
Why do you think they chose Cillian Murphy?
Well, Cillian Murphy is, what is his persona? Let's think about this.
Yes.
And not to diminish his acting talent, he is basically a face. He's an appearance. He is so amazingly beautiful, but in a otherworldly way. Mm-hmm. He plays characters that are there and ethereal and not human in some sort of way.
He has this very angular, unusual face.
Yeah, with these massive blue eyes.
Yes, very alien-looking eyes.
Yes, so that's what I thought. His persona is alien, but it's not. It's angel.
He's an angel.
He's an angel. He is so beautiful.
He's terrifying.
That he is terrifying. He comes to Earth with somebody who has no humanity, but is, on the other hand, so beautiful, more than any sort of real human could ever be.
Are you listening, Cillian?
Well, but this quality then is brought into the role of Oppenheimer as something that is divine and terrifying.
Yes. Well, he is death, the destroyer of worlds, isn't he? It's not an accident,
no,
is it?
It's not. It is this kind, that's his type. That's what he does.
Kind of divine, quasi-divine. Like Prometheus is a demigod or
he's a titan.
A titan.
Yeah.
So there's something transcendent about these characters. Something
that is not human.
But not alien either.
No,
it's divine.
It's divine, exactly. So who could produce something like an atom bomb? They have to be somewhat not human. And Cillian Murphy's persona has that in him.
Yes.
Yeah. So
because he has this very bizarre and striking and slightly scary appearance.
Exactly. So the question of Oppenheimer, who would do such a thing, is slowly revealed in the actions of this unhuman being. The actions of Oppenheimer in the film show you this ethereal being
who's divorced from reality.
Who's divorced from reality. And here this subplot actually makes sense. The idea of who is he loyal to? And he's loyal to nothing in the film.
Yes.
Not to women, not to family, not to friends, not to countries, not to causes.
He's kind of loyal to atoms or something. Just something outside humans.
Outside humans and not part of anything more meaningful.
He's a very detached person.
So you could see that he is just outside humanity. Like, as I say, like an angel coming to Earth who has got no real connection. He's sublime almost in that respect.
But in a way that's really kind of indifferent rather than transcendent.
Yeah, indifferent and terrifying.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. He's scary.
So I'm going to lower the tone for a second, but maybe this is relevant because one of the famous things about Cillian Murphy's performance in this film is that he only ate one almond every day. This is the kind of thing that interests me and excites me, isn't it? But you can see how that catches on, because that's not trivial. That's him as a performer trying to transcend his physical being, his material essence, right?
Yeah, I think he knows exactly what this role needed. Somebody who is not human.
Somebody vanishing almost.
Yeah, vanishing, or, nobody can live off an almond a day. That's insane, right?
But an angel could.
He would eat ambrosia or something. But you can see that he knows what this role is. What is Oppenheimer? And that's what he is. He is beyond human needs in this respect.
The other question that we should probably address, which came up in the discussions around this film, is the question of Jewishness and how it relates to the two main characters, protagonists in the film, in reality, and then through the medium of the film. So Einstein famously, but also Oppenheimer was non-practicing, but from a Jewish family. And the observation came up, let's say, that Christopher Nolan has not cast Jewish performers to play Jewish characters. What do you think that means? So this came from a few sources, notably David Baddiel, because he's red hot on that kind of stuff. But it came from a couple of other places as well. Do you think it makes a difference? Obviously, it makes some kind of difference, or else people wouldn't talk about it. So what do you think is the role, what do you think is the function of that kind of identitarian relationship in general and in this context in particular?
I think it's actually meaningful because it means something.
Yeah.
Yes. However, if you have insisted on the Jewishness of Oppenheimer through insisting on the Jewishness of the actor, I think it would have reduced the meaning of the atom bomb building or invention into something like, Jews inventing the atom bomb against fascism, right? And it becomes more trivial. It becomes this kind of weird revenge story.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't think that's doing justice to the event as such. It is much bigger than this. The invention of, the atom bomb was such a profound event in human history that to reduce it to this kind of Jewishness around it all would take away a lot of the importance of the event.
So it would have given it a kind of moral certainty that is not there.
Exactly. It would have given it a moral interpretation.
A moral weight.
Yeah.
That I don't think you can say was actually there necessarily, or maybe it's not the only way of thinking about it.
I think it would be a very contemporary way of understanding history, and I don't think that's justified or useful.
I think our performance anxiety stand on these things tends to be that every fiction is a kind of rewriting of history. So the point is to do it in an interesting way that opens up meaning rather than a reductive way, right?
Exactly. And this reading as a Jewish kind of thing would have really reduced this event to something very, very unprofound.
Something almost quite palatable in some ways.
This is why the casting of Cillian Murphy with the persona that he has is actually pretty genius.
Much more interesting.
Much more interesting because suddenly the significance of this, what has happened, right, through the Manhattan Project and the actual dropping of hydrogen bombs to kill human beings just becomes so much bigger than an identitarian historical reading.
All right, so thinking about Oppenheimer as a puzzle film in the way we've been setting it up, I think we may have given away already to a degree the ending, but do you think there's a spoiler there about what Nolan reveals when he pulls the curtain back? Like we've not said everything.
No.
Do you think there is a spoiler there?
I don't think you can spoil it in the way you could spoil, I don't know, The Prestige, for example, for viewers. But the question that Nolan is after, what kind of person is this? And why does he choose this story of this trial that turns out unexpectedly Let's put it this way, not to give anything away. But what it does reveal to you is the moral universe that Oppenheimer operates in. And you could, if you're a good film viewer, you could a little bit guess what that moral universe is at the end, but you only get confirmation in the last scene where the dialogue between Einstein and Oppenheimer is revealed. So could give something away about this, and because Einstein tells Oppenheimer, a thing which then influences...
He passes on some wisdom,
yeah,
let's say.
Which then influences the way he conducts himself.
And furthermore, the way that point is made filmically is through close-ups on Cillian Murphy's strange, beautiful angel face. You can really see how the casting of Cillian Murphy is helping to make that point at
Absolutely.
that moment.
And it's all filmed in IMAX, so it's all about this kind of real detailed reading of this face all the time.
So we asked ourselves at the beginning of this, what kind of film is Oppenheimer? And I think we've answered that. It's a puzzle film. It's a puzzle film with a cast of thousands. I want to shout out Jack Quaid, playing Richard Feynman. Very nice.
Well, I think they took everything from Feynman's biography and put
really
it in the film, didn't they?
Yes, I also want to shout out Alden Ehrenreich, who is one of our favourite actors.
Yes.
Who, and this tells you something about the film, is a key member of the cast, but his character name is Aid. So they can write a very important character but not give him a name.
Yes. So his performance was probably one of the best in the whole movie.
Yeah. I also liked Matt Damon for what it's worth.
Yeah. Matt Damon played against type. Yeah,
a
very
little
interesting.
bit. Yeah. Not playing a sensitive guy, but playing a blunt instrument for a change, because he's meaty and beefy and solid.
And I think that's the whole thing that is interesting about Oppenheimer is that it is like this kind of puzzle film, which is usually reserved for sort of 18-year-old boys who like, clever films that are actually not in themselves not totally clever. They just play around with plot and narrative a little bit. So like Quentin Tarantino does. He does that as well.
But maybe not as skillfully as Tarantino.
No, but so it's people who think they're clever. They like these kind of films usually.
Right.
But it's then combined with this really profound philosophical understanding of, what kind of human would create an atom bomb. So it's the combination of these two weird genres that make it actually quite an interesting film.
Thanks for listening to Performance Anxiety. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe and spread the word. Tune in next time for more discussion and analysis of performance.
Bye.
Till next time.